Well, first, I want to welcome everybody to today's presentation. Before we get started, I want to give thanks to Moreno Valley Library for hosting me today. I really appreciate it. They always do a good job when I ask to do something for Black History Month or something I'm trying to do within the city. They always host me and give me a good layout, so I really appreciate that. For those who don't know me, I think everybody knows me. For those who don't, my name is James Harris. I'm the author of Corey's Courtroom. And today I'm going to be presenting a presentation on the Green Book, actually it's called the Negro Motorist Greenbook in Sundown Towns. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping. To your left and to my right, when you first came in, there were the bathrooms and drinking fountains when you first walked in. And yeah, so just make sure that you have the taxes right in there. So if you walk into the wrong room, you're going to walk into the taxes. So make sure that this is the bathroom's right there. Like I said, I want to thank my wife and my daughter. I call them my staff. They help me set up and get everything together. So I appreciate that. And I really appreciate everybody coming out. Last year, I did a presentation on the Great Migration. You ever heard of that? The Great Migration. That was when probably 6.5 million African Americans moved all at one time between 1910. 1910 was the first wave to 1930. 'Cause, 1929 was the Great Depression. Nobody was moving, right? And then from about 1940 to 1965, another wave went. So you had all these African Americans moving and moving from the southern states to the northern states. So this kind of came out of that, because when you're moving from the northern states to the southern states, you had to travel, right? You had to travel. And at that time, the middle class, the African American middle class was starting to grow. And so they were starting to go on vacations. They were starting to move around the country. And so you've seen a lot of movement. So when I was thinking about this presentation, I was like, okay, well, how are they moving? Well, one resource that they used was a Negro Motorist Greenbook, and we're going to speak about that. That's how they move. And then we're going to talk about some of the challenges that they faced when they actually did move, go on vacations, we went to funerals, weddings, how just people just kind of move. What are some of those things that were going on? And then I was thinking about it. I'm probably going to throw in a little bit at the end. Has anybody heard of redlining? We're going to speak on that, and we're going to I'll probably end up with restrictive covenants. Anybody heard that language, restrictive covenants? Because during the Great Migration, when I was looking at it, and I'm sure you got some good footage, was I always wonder, why are some cities more densely populated with African Americans than others? You ever thought that? Like, how did Oakland get so black? How about South Side Chicago? Why are there so many African Americans on this side, maybe Caucasians on this side, but they're all sectioned off? You ever thought about that? That's my thinking. So, but there's actual reason for that. There's actually a reason for that. And so today we're going to explore that. Well, today we're going to have fun. I'm going to show you some slides, show you some videos. I'm going to have some interactions from you. I met my friend Mark, right?
Yes.
Mark, he has some great stories. And everybody has stories about the past, especially from when they were growing up in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So we're going to get started. So let me get my little clicker out. Here we go. Handy dandy clicker. Okay. Has anybody seen these books before? Okay. Sundown Towns. Well, let me ask you. Anybody can tell me about Negro Motorist Greenbook? Anybody know about that? Okay.
I know about it from this research recently, because you had mentioned in your presentation, so I kind of did some research online, and I saw it last night, actually. And it was really fascinating because of his reasoning, his rationale for starting the book. It just made all the sense in the world. But, we talked, you and I, previously about this, and, one of the things that I mentioned to you is that I had never heard of it before. Because, when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was born, predominantly black neighborhood, most black people then weren't really traveling across town unless
Right.
you were going to a funeral or you were going to visit a relative. It was specific. But stopping at hotels, motels, places like that. I never heard any of my people talk about it. So, you know, as things went on, through the research I did last night, I could see how, you know, him being a postman and traveling across town and knowing people that were going from different places, how, you know, like it was very necessary to know where you were going and where you could stay. So, you know, that's my
Very
experience.
good, very good, very good. Want to come up here, man? What about Sundown Towns? Anybody heard about Sundown Towns? What you got, Mona? Well, let me ask you something. Did you experience Sundown Towns?
Not personally, but I have family members in the last 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
Where
Coming
from?
a funeral, driving through Arizona, stopping to get something to eat, going to a cafe, everything's fine. They come out, the sheriff is getting at their car, asking them what they're doing. They were on the way to California, they have California plates. He said, good, I don't want to see you anymore. Have a great day. So there are still places throughout that is an unspoken kind of thing.
And we're going to talk about New Mexico and Albuquerque and all those things. So some videos, hopefully it works out. Yeah, so what you're going to see is a tandem. You're going to see that in order to travel safely and effectively without being embarrassed or shamed, you know, who wants to go someplace with their family and then all of a sudden, you know, you're being turned away, you can't eat, right? So you have to have someplace where you could go, restaurants, barbershops, everything that you would need to travel. But there were some challenges because of the Sundown Towns. So we're going to kind of go into a little depth. So what we're going to do now is, if I can get my thing to show. Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, you're gonna need this.
Full screen.
Now this is the book I was telling you about. Now sometimes you guys are staying in the same hotel, and sometimes you're not.
Greenbook is in reference to what was called the Negro Motorist Greenbook.
It was a travel guide for African Americans during the 60s who would be traveling in the South.
It lists all the places colors could stay down south.
Not a special book, huh?
It was written by a man named Mr. Green, a black man who traveled through the South and had a hard time.
Are you looking for the commode? Yes. Yeah, here, let me help you. It's right out there for that guy.
It was separate but equal during that time. There were a lot of whites-only places, and that could be very tricky.
The way it was, if you're black and you go south, you're gonna have to look really carefully. This can't be right. This is the place.
We are more similar than we are different. The film Green Book, it's about embracing those differences and learning to look beyond our fears, to see people for who they really are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's just a little background. So what happened is, and you seen that yesterday, right? The day before the Green Book, the Green Book. Okay, but what I found, a lot of folks had never ever heard of the Green Book. No. Until I saw them. And when my friends look at it, I was like, wow, this is something that we don't even talk about. And the question is, how come we don't know about it? And I'm talking to folks that are younger than me, who I expect to, but what about all those that are older than me? You know, some folks didn't want to talk about it because it was so difficult. But the Green Book was kind of a survival guide. So let me introduce you to, go to the next slide, Lauren. Can you hit escape? Okay. Let me introduce you to Victor H. Green, author and curator of the Green Book. Like Doc said earlier, Victor H. Green was a postal worker from Harlem, and at that time, the post office was the largest single employer of African Americans. When I was growing up, I always heard, you can always get work at the post office, you know, that's kind of making sense. So then they said, he used to travel around New York and sometimes found it difficult to find accommodations when he was traveling around New York. So what he said was, you know what, we need to make a book, or I need to make something so that I can travel and know where to go. So Victor published a travel guide in 1936 for African Americans to travel around the country without fear of embarrassment and safety. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. When you're going around, who wants to be shamed or shamed by your family in order because you can't go nowhere? So when you're traveling, what are some of the things that you need if you're traveling? Okay, we need food, so we need some restaurants, right? Okay, what else?
Directions.
We need some directions. Bathrooms. Okay, because you have kids, you know you're going to need some bathrooms, right?
You need water.
You need money.
Yes.
Gas stations, because when they talk about gas too, okay, anything else? How about if you're going to funerals, what would you expect to have? If I'm going to a funeral, I may need to have my suits done, cleaned. So I need to make some cleaners, right? How about to get your hair did? How about that? You're going to need to be able to go to a beauty parlor. How about just driving? You get tired and get fatigued. You start to come around one of these sundown towns where you're going to need some place to stay. So what happened is the Greenbook was officially named, it was called the Negro Motorist Greenbook, but it was shortened to the Green Book. And it was actually, they call it the Bible, because if you didn't have that, you'll see this in a lot of these slides. It says, make sure you have your Green Book, you might just need it. It's kind of hard for us to fathom this day that we're driving around and we're looking for a place like, okay, it's called a tourist home, right? A tourist home is where, let's say Mona had a tourist home someplace. I could look it up, okay, Mona's in Moreno Valley, and then I can go and pay rent, pay like for a little bit to stay with her. But she was listed in a book. Can you imagine having to look in a book to go to LA or to just another state to make sure that you didn't get caught? It's kind of hard for us to fathom now because we just travel very, very freely. But in 1936, he just had it just for New York. He just had just a few simple places. But it became so big and so popular, he had to expand to other states. So what do you do when you're trying to expand? You're trying to find out about a state that you're not in. Well, you do a couple of things. First of all, he's a postman, and postmen go everywhere, right? So what he did was start asking other postmen, hey, in Georgia, in Alabama, in Florida, where are some places that we can go, the African Americans can go, without being harassed and have a good time? I need the parlors, I need the gas stations. So they started sending them into him. So he started gathering all this information and putting it in a book and started expanding more and more. And then, okay, so now you're in town, right? Okay, or you're driving through a town, and you're there. What's some things you might want to need when you're there? You might want to go to a club, so they have clubs in there. You might want to go to a tavern to get a drink or a bar. Okay, so all of a sudden things started getting listed. So as time went on, and I'll show you a little bit later, as time went on, it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. At the height of it, it sold like 15,000 a year to 2 million a year books. So what he used to do was, Victor, he printed different copies, and these are some of the copies you see here. Okay, these copies right here, these aren't actual copies. Okay, these are facsimiles of them. Okay? Because the real ones, they sold for the Smithsonian, they sold for $22,000. The Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the African American Museum, they just opened it up. If you go there, you actually see a display, and they have one. Believe it or not, they sold that many copies. They're probably somebody's house right now in the attic that folks don't know, or their people went through it and threw it out, didn't know the significance of it. But so I actually don't look through them too much. I'm trying not to get them tattered. I'm trying to show you some of the things inside. But these were some of the copies that they had from 1936 to 1966 when they last printed the last copy. So here it says, Victor printed different versions of African Americans in different countries. He did one for Mexico, Bahamas, just to name a few. There was a Jewish guide in the 1930s that was used because Jewish people had a difficult time traveling on as well. In 1941 edition, the book included tailors, taverns, drugstores, nightclubs, places and points of interest, and other information to help broaden its appeal. It started as only a 16-page book in 1936 to over 100 pages. In its heyday, it sold 15 to 2 million per year. In 1942 to 1946, it was suspended due to the war, because World War II started, so they actually suspended it. But it was reintroduced as a reservation service in 1947. So what happens in 1947 when it came back, now he brought it even more. So instead of you just kind of showing up, having a book, you could actually make reservations some places. In 1956, the Federal Highway Act opened up freeways to middle-class Americans. So in 1956, you saw people starting to move and travel. The middle class started to have cars. So we have cars, and you have mobile, and then the highways started opening up. Route 66. Anybody know where Route 66 started at?
Illinois.
Chicago. Do you know where it ends? Actually, it's Santa Monica. It's at Santa Monica. But Route 66 was a major thoroughway that folks started to travel. And so if you're traveling those kind of distances, you needed something to kind of navigate through it. Victor said in the 1947 edition that there would be someday in the near future where this guy would not have to be published. Victor published it until he retired in 1954 and he died in 1960. He never saw his prediction come to fruition. His wife took it over at one time, and at that time they had an all-female staff actually running it, and that was kind of really unheard of back in those days. And so then it went out of print in 1967. So the question is, why did it go out of print? Well, a couple of things happened. I tried to bore folks too much history because I like history. 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. Okay, overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of separate but equal. So now you couldn't legally segregate. You could do it privately, you couldn't do it legally, right? The 1964 Civil Rights Act. Okay, that came into play, and then you had the 1965 Voting Act. So all those things went to start chipping away that the Green Book was no longer viable anymore. Okay? And so. So at 1967, they stopped publishing the Green Book. Like I said, one day before he passed, and he didn't get a chance to see it, it said there would be a great need. He said that one day there will be no need for the Green Book. We as a race all have the right to equal protections under the law. So he envisioned it, he saw it, but he actually didn't actually get to see it because he passed before. Before we get started, any stories about Victor? Well, prior to the Green Book, how did we do it prior to the Green Book? When you found some places where you were going to go, how did you do it? Pretty much just kind of, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you go with your family. You know your family.
Yeah, your family there.
Had family throughout and so we would stop there.
Right. And a lot of it is word of mouth. Hey, like, don't go there. Hey, go there. It's kind of word of mouth, but you never kind of had anything consolidated so you can actually look at it and see. It was kind of, hopefully it worked out.
Or else you just never stopped. Now, as you're talking, I'm recalling, we did so much traveling, my dad. This is during the 60s.
And from where to where?
Well, from California to Mississippi.
Okay. Ooh.
Because we had family there.
You got a Green Book?
I don't have a Green Book. It's so interesting that he actually moved around quite freely. However, I don't ever remember any incidents. And we did this like every summer. From Oxnard to
You're fortunate.
Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
You're very fortunate.
Well, there wasn't too many people who would challenge my dad. Anyway. But what I'm finding interesting is that once we got to, I don't know, the Mason-Dixon line, wherever that was, probably somewhere maybe in Texas, he just never stopped. We always had our own food. We had sandwiches. I mean, he used to do this drive in like a day and a half. And he would never, ever let us, once we got into the South, he would never let us drink out of the fountains. I mean, we just had to have our own water, or you just have to thirst. He would never allow us to drink out of the fountains that said white only.
Right.
So it was a whole, and as you're saying this, I'm just thinking about, we moved around quite freely.
And a lot of times when we were driving, when we were traveling, I didn't think about it because I was a little kid back in the 60s, but we always would travel with a big paper bag full of chicken wings.
Yeah.
It had grease coming out of them, right? And it was just food. It was just food for us. But what was really happening, what was going on, we're talking about Sundown Towns, like she was saying, we were trying to prepare to make sure that we didn't have to stop to have food for the kids.
Right.
So we didn't have to stop. If we did stop, we would have some food. A lot of that was, the chicken wings and biscuits and that kind of thing, right? And it was kind of a cultural thing. Yes, you're saying?
Well, I was thinking about the highway system, because if you get on the New Jersey Turnpike, you can go from New York all the way down and not go to any of those little towns at all.
Mm.
So, and they had Howard Johnson's every
What year was that?
Oh, God, I think it was the 50s and 60s, and I don't know, they still have them probably. Yeah. But you just stay on the highway.
Okay, all right. This is another little video, and this kind of explains that. I kind of like this one.
Imagine you're on a road trip with your family. The year is 1954 and you're black. Segregation is law in the South and basically practiced everywhere else in America. You're traveling down the famed Route 66 and you've just reached Albuquerque, New Mexico for the first time. There's not another town for miles and you want to pull over and sleep for the night. There are over 100 motels to choose from, but less than 8 will take you in. Picking the wrong one could lead to a humiliating encounter, or worse, a violent one. But there was actually a way to know where you'd be welcome. It was in the Greenbook. Americans fell in love with the idea of the road trip in the mid-20th century. A growing middle class meant more people had cars and jobs with paid vacation time. And a newly built interstate highway system meant the country was accessible to a big part of the population for the first time. The open road indicated freedom, and traveling by car reflected Americans' image of themselves: self-sufficient, curious, and spontaneous. It was a way for families to spend time together and see the expansive country they called home, to experience America's cultural and natural diversity. Through the 1950s and 60s, the highway became the most common way for American families to travel. Motels and roadside attractions sprang up along the highway to accommodate travelers needing a place to sleep or eat at any point on their journey. But that freedom didn't extend to all Americans. Black motorists were turned away from the roadside hotels, gas stations, and restaurants that had taken over the American landscape. Some places were so hostile that it was unsafe to even get out of the car. Sundown Towns forcibly expelled African Americans at night, sometimes violently. Black families had to take prepared food in case they wouldn't find a restaurant that would serve them, extra gallons of gasoline in case filling stations wouldn't sell to them, and even empty coffee tins in case they couldn't access a bathroom. They carried blankets and pillows, knowing that finding a safe place to sleep could mean camping by the roadside or driving long hours into the night, even though they had money to pay for a hotel. Sometimes that distance was fatal. It was the exact opposite of the spontaneous American road trip. But thanks to a Harlem postal worker turned travel agent, knowing where to go wasn't a total shot in the dark. In 1936, Victor Hugo Green collected information on hotels, restaurants, beauty salons, and mechanic shops that would reliably serve African Americans in New York City. He called his travel guide the Negro Motorist Greenbook and began publishing an updated version each year. Using his network at the United States Postal Service, which was one of the largest single employers of African Americans at the time, Green put together detailed information on businesses and private homes that would welcome black travelers. The Greenbook eventually grew to cover locations in all 50 states and sold ad space to businesses all over the country. With the help of Esso, now ExxonMobil, as a progressive corporate partner and distributor of the guides, around 15,000 copies of the Greenbook started selling each year. Victor Green's one 16-page booklet ballooned to over 100 pages and became a staple item for black families who wanted to participate in the joy of cross-country travel. And it turns out that iconic image of the open road, of freedom and family values, would become an anchor in the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King even mentions it in his I Have a Dream speech.
We can never be satisfied. As long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities.
The Civil Rights Act ended legal segregation in 1964, and just 2 years later, the Greenbook went out of print. It had become obsolete.
And as the road cut through the broad plains, you felt the tremendous space all around you, the country rolling out to the horizon, and you rolling with it. It was beautiful, and you sort of sensed the real meaning behind the word freedom.
Interesting, huh? Everything that we're talking about, and we had more people, you experience some of this. You know, she talked about going and not stopping all night. You know, that's where the can came in. Can you imagine having to have a can with you or something with you in order for you to go to the bathroom in because you know you couldn't stop? You know, packing extra blankets, extra food, extra gas. Can you have something that you use increment for bodily fluids in, and you have a gas can too? It was a difficult challenge traveling, and if you have kids, you know, kids are gonna try to stop every X amount of time. And what happens when you start to get there, you can't stop. So there were a lot of challenges that were going on with African Americans, even in 1954. You kind of think the travel was open, but it really was open for us. You hear about, you know, Route 66 and Nat King Cole said, get your kicks at Route 66. Well, Route 66 for African Americans, it wasn't really a good place to go, because like you said, in Albuquerque, there was over 100 motels and hotels, but only 8 were served African Americans. Out of those 100, how did 108? No, 100. How would you know? Well, that's where the Greenbook came in. That's how the Greenbook came in. Otherwise, you would know. Like you said, there were some folks that didn't make it, ended up getting harassed. That's how, when she said she didn't get harassed, she was very fortunate. Because most of the time, if they seen African Americans in a car, the local police were going to stop them. And we'll talk about that too. Any questions so far? We talked about Exxon Standard Oil. Now it's Exxon. Exxon. But Exxon, I really like them because he partnered with Exxon Standard Oil, and he was back then he had 76 and all the different gas stations. He was the only gas station that was franchised. They were the company was the only station that was franchised gas stations and sell them to African Americans. So what happened is that when they started selling to African Americans, like this one was in Tennessee, this was in New Jersey, then they would start selling the Greenbooks through Exxon. And as it started to grow, they started having representatives. Like for instance, some of these books, you could write in the back, like, okay, I'm in San Diego, and this was a good place to stay. If you send it in, they accepted it, and it was verified, then they'll give you like $1 or $5 for your place. Because what happened is you have to remember, I may be in one book, they have a company, I may be in one book, let's say I went on a business or I moved, so it's constantly having to be updated. So that's why he was constantly looking for information to make sure the book was accurate. You wouldn't want to drive so far and then all of a sudden get there and it's not there. So, but Exxon was essential in helping African Americans get franchises. As a matter of fact, they even hired a marketing team, for nothing else, an African American marketing team, just to help it be marketed. And that's why I got about 2 million copies being sold. So I know Exxon, I think they're kind of affiliated with, oil leaks, that kind of stuff, but they were on the right side of history in this time. Give a quick little video here. I like this, it's never paid with $20 bill.
We always leave late at night, so that we try to get to North Carolina just after dawn, so that we could drive through most of the South in the dark, because my father felt that was safer.
3 or 4 times a year I would go back and forth to Georgia. But I knew I wasn't supposed to stop at night to buy any gas or do anything, not even to use the bathroom.
If you have to relieve yourself, there was always some kind of can in the back of the car. And mostly for the adults, because with the children, they just opened both of the car doors, and the kids stood between the car doors and used the potty.
Washcloths, some wet, wrapped up in wax paper. I don't recall that we even, in my early travels that we didn't have any plastic bags. Yeah, it was wrapped up in wax paper because we'd have to use the bathroom on the side of the road.
You tried to get everything you need when it was daylight. And that included gas. If you gave them a 20 to buy gas, you didn't get any change back. And if you said anything, they might cause the law or hit you upside the head. Wasn't no change, you didn't get no change. So what you try to do is buy what little gas with the small
books, and we would look at things to sort of help us figure out where we could go. But the one thing I remember more consistently was that my father believed that the only place you bought gasoline from was from Esso, which is now Exxon. He would drive around, almost running out of gas, passing Shell stations until he could get to the Esso. And finally I asked him, I said, okay, help me understand this loyalty. And his argument was that in the 30s and 40s, when he was a kid going to visit his father's family, Esso was the only gas station that would allow black people the dignity of using the toilet on equal terms as white visitors. And so the notion of unpredictability of racism, that it would tap you on your shoulder at moments you didn't expect, was really the key. And I think that the Green Book actually gave you that confidence that you wouldn't be tapped on the shoulder unexpectedly. And if you could live your life knowing that racism was there, but knowing when you had to confront it, my goodness, that was an amazing gift.
So I never heard that before. Never paid with a 20, but you got to remember, $20 back then is like $100 now. So that's why they look for the smallest denomination to get some gas, because they knew whatever they give, they were going to give you change back. So we don't even think about those kind of things when we're traveling, huh? I mean, there's really some stuff that you really have to calculate when you're driving. And these just, I'm going to show you guys just some of the copies. They're here, like the back facilities. There's some of the copies. This is the 1940 version. 1940, and you see the different versions. Now at the bottom, they always say this: carry your Green Book with you. You may need it. You know, so what you have been looking for, we can travel without embarrassment. So it was pretty essential when you were traveling to have something in your hand so you would know where to go. Okay. And these are some of the older versions. I believe this was like one of the first versions right here. Seen this one as well. So if you see one of these books in your grandma's attic, great grandma's attic, get it, get it. You know, I can imagine those old homes that were just demolished. Those old homes that were just demolished, and you know, just wasn't. People didn't think about it. And I always thought, you know, how come I didn't hear about this when I was growing up? That's why when I put this together, I put the Green Book Beyond the Movie, things that you weren't taught in school, because this was something that's history essential to how we moved and how American actually moved. And so you think it was something that would be said, but I'm happy now that a lot of stuff started to come out, and you see a lot more presentations and about this. And the movie came out, the Green Book movie came out. If you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. It's a great movie, and a lot of this will make even more sense. You know, and I've spoken to a lot of folks a lot older than me, and they never even heard of it. So that's why this is so important. Okay, I just want to kind of show you. When I was thinking this, I was thinking, okay, well, was there any Green Book listings around here? You know, did my mom and daddy have a house of Green Book and I didn't know about it? I don't know. So I said, okay, let me kind of look. So I did a little research. And so if you know, they were, I don't know if you can see this, they were broken up by states, right? So this is California. So here's Fresno, here's LA, see here's Oakland, okay, here's Pasadena, and then I found one listing here on this page on San Bernardino, okay? There's a tourist home, Mrs. A. Phillips has an address, and M. Carlton and had an address. We have San Diego, Frisco, Santa Monica, Tulane, and then it goes into Colorado. So you would know where to go. A lot of these are no longer around because they demolished them without even knowing the historical significance of it, which is really sad. They have some in LA. You can still go see one, will turn to a hotel. But here, like I said, you could you have tourist homes, service stations, drugstores, nightclubs, taverns, garages, and carpets, beauty parlors, everything that you would possibly. And this was just in one state, because as you're traveling from state to state, you kind of need to know, right? So starting in Alabama, Mississippi, you're traveling, you kind of need to know. And you had to know that before you got there. And hopefully, 9 out of 10, a lot of these were already updated, so you will be okay. Okay, so this is one I kept looking, and so we see here Oakland. Yeah, we have Paris. Muse a Wild. I was like, what is Muse a Wild? Okay, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. And then here we have El Camino Motel. El Camino Motel on 1616 8th Street. Anybody remember old 395?
395.
Highway 395 goes about a 215. But going, yeah, that was actually free. When I was growing up, we grew up with 395. One thing I liked about the Green Book is that it showed a sense of camaraderie, but also showed a sense of, I may not know you, but we're all going through the same experience. Because why would someone open up their house for someone who come in and rent them if they didn't know you? But you only do that if you have a shared experience. I'm driving, I know what I'm going through. So if you come into town, these kids, you tag your wife, I know what you're going through too. Okay, you have a place that you can stay. You may have to pay a little bit of, rent, whatever, coming in, expense, but at least you have some place to stay. And I kind of like that as it was a national consciousness that if you needed a book, it's a shame that you needed it, but if you had it, at least you had folks that were willing to let you in the house. I think that was good heart. I think back on, I remember when Katrina hit, and a lot of folks from Katrina were looking for places to stay, and my wife, with her good heart, she was like, okay, Jay, sign up, sign up, and they come stay at our house. I was like, okay, that's good, But the thing about something like this, it was no thought. There was no thought, some people that need some place to stay, we're gonna find some place for them. So okay, so we're gonna look at Muse a While. I would see exactly what Muse a While was. Okay, it came from Clarence Muse. He was a comedian and he was an actor. Actually, he was a lawyer, but he couldn't get a job as a lawyer, so he became a comedian. Here you go, Clarence Muse, 66-year-old former movie comedian and composer of When It's Sleepy Time Down South, married to former Irene Clary Kelman, 33 of Jamaica, BIW, in Riverside, California. At his bride's request, Muse sang his fame too. He had a famous song he used to sing in all movies. Following the wedding, the ceremony, the couple will live in Muse's home in Paris, California. The marriage is Muse's third and first bride. He was 66, she was 33. Wow. Yeah, he kind of So I was reading about his history, and he is fascinating. Okay, the last movie he was in that I look back when I looked at the credits. Anybody see that Car Wash? Okay, he was the one shining the shoes of Richard Pryor. When Richard Pryor came in. Let me, I could do a whole history on what he did. I mean, maybe one day I will, because he is so interesting. Let me tell you some of the folks that he knew. He knew Joe Louis, Josephine Baker, Jack Johnson, the boxer, Jesse Owens, Bessie Smith, Paul Robeson. He utilized Kingfish, and that was for the Amos and Andy series. He wrote with Langston Hughes, and he diapered a baby named Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and so the question is, what was Muse a While? Is a 160-acre ranch that you come in and kind of hang out in Paris. Yeah, and I was like, wow. I mean, he did so much for Paris, and he all kind of history, all in the old Ebony. Like I said, I could do a whole series just on him, his life and how he traveled. And I said he was an attorney, but he knew that he couldn't become he couldn't make any money doing attorney during that time, so he turned to acting. So he had to act different than he was in order to get the parts. And so he just kept going and going and going and going and going and going. Yeah, but you ever heard of Clarence Muse? I never had, until I started doing some research, but he's a great read. And so the other one was listing in Riverside, was the El Camino Motel, Riverside, California, with a Green Book listing. Okay, that was off the 395. For all you youngsters that don't know, back in the day, Moreno Valley and Riverside, it was nothing but orange groves. It was nothing but orange groves. You drove down 60, coming from Riverside to Moreno Valley, there was like grapevines where the the race, well, I say race, but now it's the mall, you know, and there's just fruit trees and everything everywhere. There wasn't none of this. And so what it says is, it said, AAA started recognizing Greenbook as a Bible source, and they actually endorsed it, the National Travel Guide. It's a El Camino Motel, 1616 East 8th Street on US 60 and 95, located in Orange Grove. It had 24 ducts, 24 deluxe units, each with private tiles, shower, toilet, and lavatory. 8 rooms with twin beds, beautiful Monterey furniture, fully carpeted floor, and all of the units are steam heated, all right, and insulated, attractive lounge with open fireplaces, hotel service. So this is a really nice place you can go with your family. You know, and just, I went to 1616, I tried to find it, 1616 East 8th Street. It's over by now the police station. It's no longer there. The Sheriff's Department, cadets training, and all that, it's over there. It's gone. But like I said, a lot of these were just knocked down, and folks didn't even know it. You know? And like I said, in LA, maybe the next time I do it, I'll bring up some pictures of some that are still there. But you would drive by and look at the dilapidated buildings, but you wouldn't know that they really have historical value. Interesting, huh? Yeah. And this would be a nice place to kind of hang out at. You can see all the orange groves in the back. Just like that there. Okay, so now we're going to transition. We're going to transition now to Sundown Towns. I worked on this yesterday, and my daughter started laughing. She goes, trapping wild Negro. But the sign that said, don't let the sun set on you. Okay? And what you see the motorist, right? A husband, wife, and you see two little kids in the back. Okay, so now we're transitioning from what resources that you use to travel to some of the challenges that you faced when you did travel. Make sense? Okay. Remind me if I don't forget to tell you a story about this. Someone told me a story. Okay. What is a sundown town? Okay, by definition, a sundown town is any organized jurisdiction that for decades kept African Americans or other groups, Chinese, Mexican, Jewish, etc., from living in what was thus all white on purpose. Some sundown towns allowed one black household as an exception. Thus, as all white towns may include non-black minorities and even a tiny number of African Americans. Typically, when you see they were trying to categorize it as sundown towns. If you look at the census, you know, people move, right? People move. What do they move for? They want better housing, they want better schools, better jobs. So people move. If you can move, you're going to move the way you want to move too. Okay? Well, if you look at census after census after census, it's all one race, let's say Caucasian, and you may have one African American in there, that's probably a sundown town because it was kept that way intentionally. And you go, well, how can it be if it's all white? You have one family. Well, usually those were accepted because they were households for the servants. But town after town after town, year after year, decade after decade, if it's always all white, you could probably say it was intentional. And we'll talk about some of these. And this is another part of history that you never heard of. There are like over 450 books on like lynchings, but there's only one book. This is by James Lowen. He's the authority on sundown towns because it's something folks don't really want to talk about. Because when you're in a sundown town, you want to be exclusive. You want to be exclusive, but you don't want to be sure that you're not being included. That kind of makes sense? It makes a little bit of sense, a little bit more, but that's why you can see some towns that they never have any races. Because most people just move where they want to move at, unless there's some reason why you can't. And that's why you can start seeing pockets of people. When I get to the end, I talk about restrictions, sundown town covenant, restrictive covenants, and things like that. You'll see what I'm talking about as well. Okay. So this is something that just came out about Sundown Towns. Ms. Lauren?
By the time Missouri Governor Jay Nixon went on television yesterday to announce the midnight curfew for residents of Ferguson, we'd already gone off the air here on MHP. A friend of the show, Dora, who was with me at my table yesterday, stuck around and joined my colleague T.J. Holmes at his table during the news conference. After it ended, Dorian weighed in on the historical precedent to what the governor had to say.
What you just said, Raul, when the sun goes down, here is the historical context for this. I mean, if you were black in an all-white town, you could not be in that town when the sun goes down, and it was a threat to your safety.
Historian and author James Lowen, the man who literally wrote the book on Sundown Towns, uncovered thousands of these towns that existed in the United States throughout the 20th century. By some estimates, as many as 10,000 sundown towns had sprung up across the country by 1970. Some where the warning to African Americans not to let the sun go down on you was an unspoken rule that spread by reputation. Others where the warning was explicitly spelled out in signs posted along the highway or at the town or on the county line. But all of them, whites-only spaces where being black after dark could mean arrest, harassment, assault, or worse. In 1968, 21-year-old Carol Jenkins was selling encyclopedias door-to-door in the Sundown town of Martinsville, Indiana, when she was stabbed in the chest with a screwdriver and left to die in the street. So for African American travelers, making the choice about where to stop for food, gas, or a bathroom break, or rest for the night was potentially a life or death decision. And is in part what prompted the publication of this, the Negro Motorist Greenbook. This handy guide let African Americans on the road know where they could find safe harbor and where they need to steer clear of the threat of white violence in sundown towns. The Greenbook started to become obsolete when the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed racial discrimination in public accommodations. But that history of restricting travel and access to public spaces for African Americans seemed very present last night in Ferguson, where the streets, the people were warned to stay out after midnight in a town they normally call home.
Sundown towns were in existence even since it's still existed all into the 1990s. I was in Atlanta last week, this week, on Tuesday, and I was talking to a friend from Atlanta. She's from here, and she moved out there, I think, in 93. And I was talking to her, I'm about to do a presentation about Sundown Towns. Do you know anything about it? She goes, oh yeah. She goes, oh yeah. Forsyth County in Georgia is a Sundown Town. I said, really? She said, well, it's not really right now anymore. But when I moved there in 93, I was like, 93? You know, I moved in 93. We were told, okay, you need to be out of. The thing that made it even more so, she said it was Forsyth County. I said, okay, well, what city? So I know what city. She goes, no. It didn't matter what city within the county. It was the county. And I was like, whoa, okay, I get it now. You know, and she said, yeah, and she would give me story after story after story after story after story. And I was like, you know what, this is at 1993. I mean, this is all in our lifetime. Yeah, and so she just was telling about all these different stories about how it still exists. Anna, Illinois. Anybody heard of Anna, Illinois? Anna, A-N-N-A, Anna, Illinois. Well, in 2001, Mr. Lowen, when he wrote this book, he went and he was interviewing some folks in Anna, Illinois. And so when they asked him, what are these sundown towns in Anna, and one of the answers was, it was yes, Anna, Illinois was a sundown town. Anna, A-N-N-A, stands for Ain't No N-Words Allowed. And then the lady went on to say, oh, well, it's not like that anymore. But there are some things that are just understood. Because everything didn't have to be done by law or ordinance, it can be done by reputation. So if I told you, don't go over there because that was happening, then you just don't go, right? Then ultimately, it just more and more, year after year, decade to decade, generation to generation, people just don't move. Any questions so far? So we're talking about sundown towns. Now, I can imagine driving, and I'm starting to see the sun go down, and I've got to make some calculations of where I'm going to stop at, where am I not going to stop at, where I'm going to eat at, you know, because something could really happen, you know, and you'll never be heard of again. Isn't it some good stuff?
Yes.
I'll tell you, I like this, man. Oh, here we go. These are some of the signs that were actually posted. Okay, this one, don't let the sun set on you, understand. Inward, this is Shepherdstown, God help you if the sun ever sets on you here. This one is that, this was an advertisement to live in the city of Ozark Mountains. It says, cool summers, mild winters, pure soft water, beautiful scenery, pretty homes, no mosquitoes, no buzzards, I think there's no malaria, no drought, no Negroes. Okay. Here it says, the Sundown Town wasn't exclusive just to African Americans. They were trying to drive out all races, Jews. Here it says, Japs, don't let the sun, you know, come down on you. Keep moving. This is Rose Hill. Whites only, within city limits after dark. No dogs, Negroes, Mexicans. Let's see here, black men, don't let the sun down. Don't let the sun down catch you. And saints, I didn't get the last of it. White men shoot up church, group is toast, no blame too loud after sundown. These are actual signs that can you imagine driving through a town, you see that? What would you think? A better question, what would you do? Would you stop? Kids are hungry, you gotta go to the bathroom. I mean, these are the life and death decisions you're making for your family every single day. Interesting, huh? We're gonna look at this up here. It says Village of Riceboro. Next one. But have you guys ever even seen these signs before? Interesting, huh? These are real signs. These are real signs. They had a sign up in Hawthorne. Going to be out of town by sundown, Hawthorne, California. We'll talk about that too. Okay. Still used today, a black meter used by residents of Sundown Towns in Arkansas, Kentucky, and Missouri, and Tennessee to warn African Americans to get your black ASS out of the city limits by sundown. Mule is another word for ASS, for ass, you know, and so that's what they use. So even if they didn't say it, there were signs up all around that you would know it.
So that's still used today?
I think it's still in Tennessee today. They may have taken it down, but I think it was that publication. It was still there, yeah. And I had a video of it, but I didn't want to have too many videos, but yeah, they had actual video they wouldn't see it when I was reading up on it. Sundown Towns in Villa Grove, Illinois. Illinois have a high sundown population. Nevada also had a whistle for Native Americans. There were seven sundown towns that had whistles that went off at 6 o'clock, and when it was 6 o'clock, you had to be out of town. So we were standing, I think it's Michigan, Ohio, Villa Grove, Nevada had two. Nevada was just for African Americans, and that's actually a tower. I used to work in Chino, and on the mountain, they had a blue light and flash that when if there was an escape, they would alert the community that there was an escape, right? So everybody would know. And I was thinking about that, and I seen it when I seen this. You know, can you imagine you working, and then all of a sudden, or you get close, you got to know it, you got to get out. I got to get out. You know, I got to get out. And so yeah, some were taken down with the actual one that they used. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. I know some of the stuff is kind of like, wow, I can't believe it, huh? Like, kind of like jaw dropping, like, man. You know. So, like I said, if there's no questions, either I'm doing a really good job or I'm confusing everybody. Okay, towns went sundown to a few reasons. One, violence or threat of violence. You're being threatened with violence to get out of this town, you're not going to stay in those towns, right? Okay. KKK, there were local ordinances that made it impossible for you to stay in a town. We're going to talk about some of this a little later too. Official government action, FHA. FHA, you know, the Federal Housing Authority. You know, when you were a vet coming back from World War II, for instance, in 1945, you could get VA loans. Is that correct? And the FHA was giving you loans. Well, only 98% of those loans went to white, and only 2% went to blacks. Okay, so you're going to start to see a disparity of how some towns got built. Because if I can't buy a home, then I'm going to have to go rent someplace, right? Or I have to move in with my people or something like that. But I'm not going to be able to build a home and build a community, especially communities aren't being built for me. We'll do that a little bit later, but I was kind of give you a little, they call it de jure government action. That means that when the government takes actions to prevent you from doing something. They call it de jure. So that's just really good stuff. All right, freeze outs. Freeze outs is when you go someplace and this won't say you nothing. They're not going to tell you to get out. They're not going to say nothing. So if you can't buy any food, you can't buy any gas, you can't do nothing, then ultimately you live on your own, right? You just can't do any of these things. Freeze you out. Same thing with buyout. They say, okay, we'll give you X amount of dollars for your property, or we're going to burn it down. So you know, you got to go. Reputation, like you said, there are some places that we know. You know, don't go over here or don't go over there. You kind of just know it. And went from family to family, you kind of just know it. You just don't go. You just don't go. All right. And then planned or unplanned restrictive covenants and redlining. We're going to be talking about those next. So what you're going to see is, I want you to notice a box. Because the question I asked before is that have you ever thought about, and you can think about this now, why are some cities or some areas so densely populated with African Americans and what others aren't? Well, you're going to start to see, and this is the first step. If I can't live in a sundown town, okay, where can I live at? All right, so now we're going to start closing the box, and you can see, and it start making sense when you start driving in different areas, even in Moreno Valley, or just LA, or whatever you're going, in whatever major city, you can see why it's so densely populated over there, and this is that. No. Anybody know what suburbs are? You might know what suburbs, like the suburbs. You might know what the suburbs are? Like, you know, if you have a city, right? And you have cities, then you have houses that are built outside of the city, the suburbs, okay? And those were like Thousand Oaks or something, you know, just the suburbs, right? Around the city. Well, those were built, and those were actually restricted. That's why you see most of the suburbs are what? More Caucasians, all right? But we're going to look at that in a minute. A few towns and cities that went sundown in California. So I went, okay, you know, this is sundown town. Where they at? Sundown towns, people think it's all southern. It's all deep southern states. Well, the reason why they're not the deep southern states, and it's a more northern phenomenon, because remember, southern states, they needed kind of like free labor, okay? But the industrial states like Chicago or San Francisco was a port city, you know, they had industry. So now you have people, remember the Great Migration, I said people moving there? Well, now they're going to look for jobs too, so now there's natural conflict, all right? So what you have here is that these are the towns that actually went sundown, and these are just a few. California was the fourth largest sundown area. They had 113 sundown towns, okay? 113 at one time. Dr. Lauren, when he did his projection, he actually documented about close to 4,000 to 5,000, but he knew that there were another 5,000, at least another double that no one documented or said. So that's why he put the number at 10,000, which is probably true. Because you can be sundown by reputation, right? But no one knows about it? Okay. Let me see, the third was Nebraska with 117. Kansas had 100. I'm sorry, number two, three. Nebraska was 117, was third. Number 2 was Kansas with 135, and Ohio was 140. Okay, so someone throw me out of state that you live in. Texas. Okay, Texas had they were fifth with 106.
New York.
Let me see New York. Oh, they had 45 of them.
How about Illinois?
Gang of them. Illinois had a ton. Is that Ohio? Or is that Chicago?
That's Ohio.
Ohio? Yeah, that was 140.
How about Idaho?
Idaho. They had 7. They had 7.
Surprised it was only 7.
Okay. I would looked at even Utah. I would think that would be a high saturation in Utah. And I looked at you want to get to Idaho quickly?
Well, I did.
A question though, so this is representative of California, what you have right here, right?
Just a few.
Okay, so Hawthorne, I was born in LA, so Hawthorne, is this dated or is this present time?
Well, not present time now. Now it's kind of changed.
Okay.
But it was born out of the Sundown Towns.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you came in. We talked about, you could tell it was towns of sundown based on generation after generation of no minority population moving in. Like for instance, there are islands, beaches, coastal mountain areas, vacation areas, like living by the beach, living in the mountains, living out in nice places. There were no African Americans there. Right. They were sundowns. In Santa Ana, they used the fire department to burn out any African Americans there. I said, there's a whole hit I can go down. But some of these kind of make sense. La Jolla, think about it, Brea. It's not like for now, but back in the day, it had all kinds of different things. Beverly Hills, Fullerton. Yes, ma'am.
No, I was just wondering, are they sundown towns because of the signs, because of, or are they sundown towns because people have you tried or couldn't afford to live there, or
If they definitely a sundown town, one by reputation, but also like I said a little bit earlier, if you look at the census and there has been no minority movement within after decades, then it was probably adopted as sundown town because there was a reason why you couldn't move there. And then they look at some of the ordinances and some of the things that restricted them, and I'm gonna talk about those too. But yeah.
Like I know where I grew up in LA, where my parents grew up, and my cousins in part of Inglewood where the avenues are. Back in I knew they could not buy a home. It wasn't until like the early 70s my cousins were able to buy a home in the avenues.
Where is it at?
In Inglewood.
In Inglewood, okay. Keep that in mind. I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna show you something when you get there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I'm going to go to my next slide with restrictive covenants and redlining. Absolutely. Just to address real quick. Remember I showed you that picture about the African Americans driving their car, the sundown town. One of the things that when they're driving, if I was driving with my wife and I had my daughter in the back, and I had a car, and I got stopped by the cops, something that was used to get me through, I would say, I'm just a chauffeur, and I'm bringing my car to the owner. And then the cop would look in and say, well, who is that? My wife, right? I would say, well, that's the maid. And these are her children. And he would say, where's your chauffeur's cap? So a chauffeur's cap was always kept in the back. So then it would pass him through. Interesting, huh? So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stories. I was talking to the doctor. He was telling me about a story about what that story about the wheels. The wheels.
Mark,
you
want to tell me?
There was a car driving. It had black wheels in the back. It had white wheels in the front.
Somebody a friend told me this. I don't know if this is
okay,
true.
let's hear it.
This is going through Texas, and they had some black walls in the back and some white walls in the front. And he said a cop stopped him and made him put the black walls in the front and white walls in the back. So he said it looked like a black man was chasing a white man.
And there's another story I heard. That's like Sundown Towns and the Greenbook was so hand in hand. Said they were driving, and I guess there was it wasn't a law, it was like an unwritten rule that if you're driving behind a white driver, you could not pass them because you could not kick up dirt and stuff and hit the white driver. So you had to stay behind them. I know stuff seems kind of far-fetched, but if you kind of think about how how it came about, it kind of makes sense. You know, I wouldn't overtake somebody just because I wouldn't want to get stopped and the whole 9 yards. So these are just a few. Like I said, California had 113, and these are just a few. Like I said, people want to live where they want to live at, right? I always think, okay, why are these people over here? Why are these people over here? For instance, have you thought about Chinatown in San Francisco? How come it's Chinatown? You know? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. In Humboldt County, you know, remember Chinese were working on the railroad, right? There's a large population of Chinese and Japanese in the United States. And something happened, then they started running them out, and what they did was they had like about 4 hours to move all their stuff, which they just burned them out. And then they threw them on a giant ship and sent them to San Francisco. And that's why they all landed in San Francisco. That's why you had Chinatown, because they expelled all their Chinese and Asian population. You know, so you start looking. Okay, why is that all that? Why is that all that? Well, there's a reason for that. A lot of it's false, but you know, once you start getting a riot going, you know, they did burn you out. They burn out African Americans. You know, you ever heard that expression? Not a Chinaman's chance in hell, something like that. Well, that was they had burned them out, and they could smell the flesh from how they burned them out. They only give them like an hour to get everything that you had to get out of town. But they didn't have it, and they burned them up. Okay, get them out. Sundown Towns were serious. And yeah, these were here that were here just in California. African Americans who knew about sundown towns made up rules to predict, to avoid them, which makes sense. And you're trying to protect yourself, you know. Is there any jurisdiction with a color in its name? Okay. Whiteboro, Texas. White City, Kansas City. Whitehall, Arkansas. White Town or White Country. Brownsburg or Brownstown. Greensfield, Greenwood. Towns named for idyllic concepts like liberty and harmony. When you look at that's the slogan, Village of White Bread, and you see like a white guy, etc., choking an Indian. And these are real signs. So even if I didn't know that was a sundown town, you think I'm gonna come here if I'm not him? And so, yeah, when people say that some folks kind of made it from jurisdiction, you kind of have to make some common sense when you're traveling. You know, why am I going to go someplace that says Whiteburg and has that sign? Where's my Greenbook at? Any questions about sundown town? Like I could have a whole discussion of just sundown towns, but we're going to keep it moving. Yes, sir.
James, the thought that was going through my mind when you introduced the subject of sundown towns was I was probably born in one. And guess what? Idaho.
Yeah.
My family, I would describe as passive racists.
Okay.
They talked about it among themselves.
Right.
And I was exposed to that. My first experience with outright racism happened when I was working for an aerospace company in Sacramento. I worked in a chemistry lab, and we hired people in the summer as part-time technicians. And this one person noticed the African American that was working in that lab, and he says, "What are you doing with that Negro over here?"
That's right.
And I was floored, even though I hadn't really been exposed to blatant racism.
Right.
It shocked me. And I said, "Well, why would you say something like that?" He says, well, in North Carolina, it was okay to have a nigger for a pet. Just amazing.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's why I mentioned the term, I don't think it's used, it's probably my own term, but passive racism is rampant, even now.
Right.
And that's very, very much alive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the only way we get through that and around that is through education, talking to folks. You know, I met you yesterday for the first time, and we just talked. You know, he looked at me as a black man, looked at me as a white man. We just talked. I said, hey, you want to come out for a presentation? He goes, yeah. Now he's here today, and that's what it takes. Because when you're in a sundown town, it not only hurts those that can't get in, it hurts those that are in there, because they can't interact with anybody else and learn about anything else. So they have a very narrow view of the world. Illinois has 472 sundown towns. But yes, the sundown towns is really interesting work on that.
How many Mississippi had?
All of them had 13.
They probably didn't need to have sundown towns.
Right. They need to have. Okay.
It was understood.
Yes, ma'am.
But I would say too, that it's fair to say that whatever number that they've actually written down, that it has to be double, because that's just what people knew. So what about what people didn't know?
Well, yeah, because he went into one town and asked a guy, he was interviewing somebody, and said, well, what about the sundown towns? He goes, you know, we don't have those here. We don't have those here. He's like, okay, whatever. So then he talked to her secretary, and he said, so, you know, what about the sundown towns? And she goes, oh, you know the ones that, the ordinance that said that black people couldn't stay in the city limits? He goes, yeah, that one. Because I don't know anything about it. You know, so to your point, so, you know, he asked one city about a sign, and they were like, why would we do that? Why would we put up a sign? You know, as years started going on and started getting not so tolerable, then people kind of knew it, but they just didn't do it. So we got to move on to the next section. Any more questions about sundown towns? Any questions after, you can always speak to me and, you know, what gives you comments. Redlining, who knows about redlining?
It's a real estate term. Actually, for us, redlining is for lending, right?
Yes.
Redlining is that they would not lend you in a certain geographical area.
Well, it's also to keep by your houses.
It's all part of that. It's all part
Right,
of that.
exactly.
What you said, go ahead, Mona.
Yeah, the same thing.
Okay, go ahead, Annie. And I'm not sure if everybody heard these terms before, but he's right, it's a real estate term, but usually it's for banks. He says, redlining, how banks destroy a neighborhood. This one really talks about Detroit. This one talks about Detroit. It says the various methods which have been used for many years with the sanction of city governments, de jure, when governments are actually doing it, with the sanction of city government to isolate certain neighborhoods and literally box blacks and poor minorities into decaying areas of cities around the country. Keyword box are almost as numerous as the arms of an octopus. These practices have long been widespread in the city of Detroit. Urban renewal, accurately labeled Negro removal some 30 years ago, has been a major culprit for has the rezoning in neighborhoods. We're trying to zone something or redline something. Redline is like this, okay. Let me do it like this. Okay, put a red line here. Okay, that's a neighborhood that we're going to give loans to. We're going to have businesses, and we're going to have parks and everything else. Over here, where I'm at, you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have no loans, no homes, because you know homes and property value, if it goes up, business comes into your homes, right? Whatever. So all of a sudden now you start having ghettos. So the question is, how do they determine which part is red line and which part is not? And the banks did this. The banks did this. Remember when I talked about the loans from the government, the New Deal, Roosevelt, the New Deal, and they wanted to get us out of the depression, so they wanted to have home buyership, right? So they're giving out loans so you can buy a home, all right? Well then, but you buying a home and me buying a home is going to be different because we're going to live in different areas, all right? So what you see here It says redlining is an instrument used by banks or mortgage companies to keep non-whites from living in certain areas of the city. And this is just a little one. It says like the hood. Okay, you know, they're like the hood. Okay. Okay, dollar sign. That's like big money by the beach, right? Okay, and then okay. So that's a little funny. I'm going to show you guys some real stuff.
It was more than banks though, but the real estate agents participated in that. They wouldn't show
Yes.
you, even show you a house in that area.
Well, when I say, you're right. When I say banks, I mean the banks, the realtors, the underwriters, everybody in that chain. Because if you go up to 60, you go to City of Industry, and it's all Asian. You know, you're right. They wouldn't show you stuff in that area. So absolutely. So
If you had cash money, they wouldn't show you. They would steer you away from there.
It's not so white here, look. Bad example. Ignore sweater dog people. A tote bag full of kale. You're killing me, lady. Okay, maybe this neighborhood is mostly completely too insufferably white, but that's just the way things are here. It doesn't mean we're racist.
I'm sure you're not, Ron, but the fact that so many suburbs are mostly white is no accident. It's the result of decades of racist federal policy that affect us to this day. Look!
Hooray, games! What the heck kind of game is this?
It's Settlers of the Suburbs, redlining edition.
Cool!
Little Donovan, you be green. Ron, you're red.
All right, red, just like the name. Looks like I've got the advantage.
No, you don't. See, in the 1930s, as part of the New Deal, FDR created loan programs to help Americans finance their homes. But to decide who got those loans, the government created color-coded maps in which green neighborhoods were good and red neighborhoods were bad. This practice became known as redlining. Because of these policies, if you lived in the green neighborhoods, it was super easy to get a home loan.
Oh, right, I can buy property.
But for folks in the red areas, no loans were available.
I can barely afford rent with this. There's no fair, the red areas are screwed.
Yeah, they were. And do you know why some areas were designated as red?
No, but I can guess.
Those were the neighborhoods where African Americans and other minorities lived, and redlining systematically prevented them from getting home loans.
Well, I know what I'll do. Just take my little guy and put him in the green neighborhood.
Sorry, that's against the rules. Early suburb developers like William Levitt instituted explicitly racist policies.
Levittown homes must not be used or occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race.
And the federal government itself encouraged developers to discriminate.
Developers, I want you to exclude non-whites.
The result of these policies is that from 1934 through 1968, a whopping 98% of home loans were given to white families.
Yes! Oh, okay, this is not fair. I did not get to pick what color I was when I started.
Yeah, no one does. And this advantage compounded over time. The families in the green or white neighborhoods were able to purchase homes and accrue wealth.
The market went up. I can sell my house and buy a bigger one.
Whereas the people in the red neighborhoods got none of those opportunities.
I can't afford property. I'm behind on my electric bill.
In the green neighborhoods, the influx of new wealth attracted new businesses.
Whoa! We got an organic grocery.
Which caused property values to go up. Which meant white families could sell their homes and send their kids to college.
They go up so fast.
Passing down their wealth and advantages to future generations. Meanwhile, the red neighborhoods had far less ability to build wealth, and many remained trapped in poverty.
This game is rigged.
Yeah, it was. That's why laws were eventually passed that made most of these discriminatory practices illegal.
Great! Finally, I can move. I don't have enough money.
Exactly. Without wealth, families in the red neighborhoods couldn't afford to move up, keeping these communities separated by race. Today, 70 years after Levittown was created, it's still less than 1% black.
I may be dead, but the effect of my racism lives on.
And if the neighborhoods are segregated, that means the schools are too.
What? No, that can't be true. We ended school segregation back in the 60s.
Sorry, Ron, but I'm afraid that's not true.
Ron, this is Nicole Hannah-Jones. She's a New York Times investigative reporter who covers civil rights issues, including school and housing segregation. Nicole, would you mind telling Ron what most people get wrong about segregation?
People tend to think of segregation as an archaic term for Jim Crow policies that led to the civil rights movement. But the truth is that black children are more segregated in schools now than at any time since the 1970s.
And in the U.S., schools are largely funded by property taxes. Since property values in the white neighborhoods are so much higher, their schools get way more money to spend on things like facilities, teachers, and supplies.
On the other hand, predominantly black and Latino schools are massively underfunded. They're less likely to have AP, science, and math courses, and they're the least likely to have experienced and qualified teachers.
The truth is, Lil Dominic doesn't just go to the best school, he goes to a segregated school.
No.
This is a direct result of decades of redlining policies enacted by our own government to build the suburbs. Highways that were built to make access to the suburbs easier for white Americans will often run right through black middle-class neighborhoods, destroying them.
People in the past were the worst.
It's not just the past. Banks still regularly charge black homebuyers higher rates on loans than they do white homebuyers, even when they have the same credit. Worst of all, black and Latino home seekers still experience 4 million incidents of illegal housing discrimination every year.
But, I didn't do any of that stuff. I'm not racist, and I worked hard to get this house.
Of course. But without realizing it, you've also gotten a leg up from America's history of racist housing policies. The suburb you live in was built on a foundation of segregation. And we can't close our eyes to that. Hey, Adam here. If you like that, be sure to watch it.
Interesting, huh?
That's very good.
Interesting, huh? I didn't get into zoning, but zoning is really interesting too. That's why when you have zoning in your city, you need to go check it out. Because, in the suburbs, let me tell you what you don't see in the suburbs. You ever seen liquor stores in the suburbs? You ever seen any construction plants in the suburbs? No, you see this beautiful homes, right? Because that was zoned out of there. So in African American neighborhood or minority neighborhoods, what do you see? A liquor store in every corner. So there are certain things that are just actually zoned into where you live at. And so that's why you look at the suburbs, you can tell that it was actually done on purpose by the government, from loans, real estate agents, developers. They had developers say, okay, unless you develop only for this group, then we're not going to let you come in and develop. So, we're trying to make some cash, right? And so they go ahead and develop. Email?
Yeah, I also heard, I had read some about the redlining, that when they gave loans to African Americans, they set it up for failure. So they would default on a loan and they would lose the home because it was set up in a way where either was just, it was just set up so for them to fail. So they would lose the home, lose all the money they put into the home, and they're back in renting.
Right. Because how do you build wealth? You build wealth through property, property through equity. Equity attracts businesses. Businesses will invest into your neighborhood. And so then, like you said, what happens is that you buy a home, then you take the equity of it, send your kids to college, and all of a sudden new kids come back from college, buy a home, and all of a sudden now you sell that home, you buy another home, so your home's bigger, so all of a sudden now your community where you're at is building wealth. But what if you can't do that? What if you can't even get a loan to buy a home? So you're going to stay where you can stay at, right? And so then the property value is going to drop, because then people are going to start even want to invest over there. Or they're going to put strip malls or liquor stores or things like that in your neighborhood. So now you start having drugs, you start having poverty, and so here we go. Very good, very good.
Jay, before you move on.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make a point about what they said about the middle class African Americans or in that red line area. For example, I live South Central. This was in the 60s, a little bit north of Imperial Highway between Central and Wadsworth, and Central and Avalon. But when the 105 freeway came through, that was a middle class area. On the south side of Imperial, you had tract homes, 3
Really?
bedrooms, 2.5 bath, 2 bath. On the north side of the where we live, shotgun house,
Wow.
1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. It was just kind of fragmented, but those people more affluent. They moved by eminent domain, they moved all them people out of there for the 105, for the suburbs to connect to LAX. And that was part of it, and that was a prime example of what they did. And after that, the neighborhood was kind of never the same.
Yeah.
Because those people had a little bit of wealth, 2-parent family households, and it just changed the whole demographic.
Just in case you guys didn't know what eminent domain is, that's when the government or
The police
city,
power of the
whatever,
state.
they'll come in and they're offering you the home on the fair market value, not what you could get for it, the fair market value, and you have to sell it because they're taking it by eminent domain, and then take the property, build a house through it, and you got to take whatever you can get. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, good job. Okay. Okay, so region cities red line. Banks and cities determine one black home in an area could prevent other community members, blacks, from receiving loans. The banks use the one-drop rule to judge neighborhoods as desirable or not. Criteria used, infrared by Negroes. Respectable homes, but too close to the Negro area. Full of poor Negroes. In 1968, the Fair Housing Act outlawed redlining, but it was still being done. The Federal Housing Association shaded good neighborhoods green or blue, which included lower and middle class whites. Red areas are considered unfit, blacks and immigrants and Latinos. Okay, so I'm going to show you a color scheme so you kind of really get a good visual of this.
James,
Yes.
you want to talk about what the one-drop rule is?
The one-drop rule came out of the South to determine race. If you had one drop of African American blood in you, then you're African American. You know, so yeah. One drop. How the FDA called residential segregation de jure, and they call it residential segregation. I read this book called The Color of Law, and it talks about all the government did. From everything everybody's talked about to even more, how the government boxed us, and I keep the word using box, so I'm going to show you in a minute. Okay. Redlining legend used by financial institutions, banks, and mortgage companies. Okay, so you see the vest is blue, right? Still desirable, green, still desirable, a dark blue. Definitely declining, okay, we gotta watch out for that. And then we have hazardous, that's what all the African Americans do. Okay, so I want you to notice just everything is kind of squared off. We're trying to make everything into a box, okay? No matter where they're at, we try to make it into a box, okay? This is LA. This is LA. So this is what Ray was talking about in terms of, it's Culver City and a lot of different areas. You close, you can kind of see where it's at. Sorry, guys. That's LA. So when I was thinking about this, you know, one of the questions I've already asked, why are some cities more populated in certain areas of African Americans? I kept coming back to that, right? You go to Philly, you go to New York, you go to Chicago, you go to LA, you go to, how come? How come? Because I know I'm gonna move where I can move, unless there's a reason why I can't move, all right? So here you're starting to see Sundown Towns, I'm not going there, right? Because I can't, get run out. Here is redlining, all right? All right, here we go. This is redlining in Oakland. Why is Oakland so black? Well, you can see why. You can see why it is. Because they're redlined to stay in a box. Stay in a box. Everything's a box, right? Green's good. Blue is still desirable. Yellow is being less desirable. Red is bad. Oakland, just now.
I just wanted to mention, too, to remember the projects were specifically designed for African Americans. They were government projects to keep us really boxed in, and that was back in the 30s and 40s.
Because if you're building homes, in every mandate city, when you're building homes, you have to have an area for the poor. Okay? So they would have to build subsidized housing. So if I'm not giving you a loan for housing, to buy a house, then I gotta build apartments, right? Which turns into, I'm gonna fit out in a minute, because I can't live anyplace else. So that's all part of this. Very good. Okay. Philly, same thing. All these major cities, right? Remember I said in the very beginning of my presentation, African Americans were moving to great migrations, and they're moving up to the northern states to try to find housing and better jobs. Well, then they were kind of being forced through Sundown Towns and through redlining to be in a box to where they could live at. South Philly, you hear about South Philly? African Americans, okay, here we go, Philly. Redline in Chicago, produced ghettos, that's what you're talking about, Deborah. Okay, and you guys, are you guys kind of starting to see, in terms of boxes? That's why you see a lot densely populated people in one area. Okay, Chicago, Detroit. And I remember I read that article about how destroyed housing, neighborhoods. Okay, so box. Okay, so what you saw, okay. So then you have redlining, I'm gonna finish with this. Anybody heard of restrictive covenants? Okay, you know what a restrictive covenant is, right?
Yeah, it's in the deed, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the deed, and the grantor of the deed decided what type of property, or what that property could be used for. So it's like CC&Rs, conditions, restrictions, and covenants, or whatever. So that's my understanding. It's a deed that's recorded, and it follows the property.
Okay.
Property. So,
yeah, use all that fancy word, CC&R.
Okay.
Okay. What a restricted covenant is that when you sign the contract to buy your home, right, there are certain conditions in it. Okay. Covenant, usually hear that in a religious term. Covenant just simply means promise, like a promise to do something, right? Restrictive means that you're restricted from doing something or restricted to do something. Follow me so far? So we have restrictive covenants. So in your deeds, and maybe in some of your deeds now, some of the older deeds, there's language in there that prevented me selling to certain people in a certain way, at certain times, right? Okay, so this is one restrictive covenant. So restrictive covenant is the two property owners, somebody actually bought a house, right, in the suburbs, right, used to sell property to whites only, used in all parts of the United States. This is a famous Hansberry case where they won because of restrictive covenants in here. So let me kind of read this and try to break it down to you so you kind of understand exactly. I'm just going to read this line right here. It says, well, I'll read the whole thing. It says, lot shall be, I'm sorry. It is further mutually covenanted that the permanence hereby conveyed, that I'm transferred, shall not at any time be conveyed, mortgaged, or leased to any person of, okay, here we go, Chinese, Japanese, Moorish, Turkish, Negro, Mongoloid, or African American blood or descent. Does any one of us here is not in that group? Okay, yeah, we're all in that group, right? Said restrictions and covenants shall run with the land. That means that if I sell it to Deborah, then Deborah's bound by this covenant if she sells it to somebody else. Okay, so if I sell it, then she can only sell it to a white because she can't sell it to anybody else, right? Follow me? All right. Okay, this says, said restrictions shall run with the land, and any breach of any or either thereof shall work as a forfeiture of title, which may be enforced by reentry. What that means is that, let's say I do sell it to Deborah, and then she decides to sell it to Anne that was not within this covenant, then the bank has a right to reentry. That means to go in and then take the property back.
This is in the deed or what?
It's actually in deeds. In most deeds, you have it became unenforceable, but this was in the deeds. And there's tons of these. If you go back and look at old deeds, they're still there because they're deed of property. So if I'm white and I have all these restrictions and I don't want my property taken to me, why would I not sell it to somebody white, right? And then she knows the restriction here. Why would she not sell to somebody white? Because I don't want the bank to come in for reentry and take the property from me. So that's why you see decades and decades and decades of heirs that stayed white because they didn't want the property taken from them. because of restrictive covenants. So we had Sundown Towns, we had redlining, we had restrictive covenants. Can you see how it's getting harder and harder for some place to live? So if I can't even get over there because of restrictive covenants, I gotta live where I gotta live at, right?
I was going to say that West LA, a lot of LA, the west side of LA was under restricted covenants. That's why a lot of African Americans are on the east side of LA. And until they broke that restricted covenant, you couldn't buy a home in Adams, Washington Boulevard. You couldn't buy a home anywhere over there, because it was under restricted covenant.
How did you know about the restrictive covenant?
I researched it.
So you researched it?
Yeah, I did.
So, and it's funny because you said you just knew that you couldn't buy over there. You just knew that you couldn't buy. So guess what you didn't do? You didn't buy. And the realtors who were showing you homes, they didn't show you there because they know you couldn't. Even though that was illegal. But here, these covenants were illegal. Okay, here's a restricted area in Seattle. Race band created ghettos in cities. You can see how it's starting to create ghettos. If you can't buy a home, you got to be in low-income, subsidized housing. You can't buy a home you wanted to, then that's where you're at. So just stop finished, guys. So here, we had redlining. You have restricted covenants. You have Sundown Towns. You have bank loans. Ultimately, what you got was public housing for African Americans that produce ghettos. So it was a systematic reason why, if you go to certain areas, why they're the way they are, there's a reason why they're the way they are. Any questions? We're almost done.
You know what, and this just came to me, and it's going to stick a pin in it, and it may be a reflection, and it's definitely open up discussion. But even within those boundaries, because your caption says public housing for African Americans produce ghettos. But I'm thinking the ghetto represents the people and not the restricted area, because you don't have to be a ghetto to live in a restricted area.
Well, I guess
that's a point, though.
But I guess, what's your definition of ghetto? That's what you have to figure out what that is. And so it's not a people. It's just in this framework I'm thinking of, because of some African Americans. That's what we were kind of forced into, and so it became low-income housing, because then the housing was it never got renovated, it never got subsidized, it never got a boost from the government,
right?
And so it kept being more and more run down. Exactly. You use ghettos, you can say for Hispanics they say barrios. It was just where lower-income, poor people could not even get ahead based on the government budget.
I got you. That's a good way to wrap it.
A good question. I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that your next component has to do with gentrification.
Yeah. Maybe that'd be that gentrification.
But as minorities get better jobs, they force their way out of those places.
But a lot of them, if you look even right now, they're not.
No, let them out of there. One thing that thing you said, that's illegal. So you can't buy and sell the house anymore.
Yeah, but if I don't sell it to you, it's hard to enforce. Take me to court, make me do it. It's difficult.
No, we had a neighbor when I was a kid, and he forced his way out of the area.
Well, that was what, 30 years ago?
In the 70s. I mean, but it was worse.
No, I was just going to say, just a quick comment that, throughout my time on this earth, I've often looked for places to stay, for places to live, to rent, and it dawned on me just one day when I was looking for a place to stay, and I was like, I never ever had the opportunity to choose the place where I wanted to live. I always lived where only they would rent. It's like you accept the place that says yes, not the place where you're like, oh, I really like that place. And then, of course, the place that you wanted to live are the places that call back and say, no, we didn't. But then, so you just live where they will let you live, not the place. And, so I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Any questions about this before we go? We'll go 2 more minutes and we're out of here. Okay, so that's my time for today. Hope you enjoyed it. if somebody came in afterwards, any other discussions you want to talk about? Greenbook, Sundown Towns, restricted covenants, redlining before we leave?
I hope that people understand that the reason why people are still bringing up race and race issues and mobility and upward bound is because there's still laws on the books and there's still people that follow this mentality that it's not a level playing field still. I mean, if because of redlining and because of all of that, all the good property got bought up.
Yeah.
The ocean property, the mountains, all of those areas. So now that you can buy, even if you have the money, where are you gonna buy? So it's always that catch up and definitely trying to adjust to the new rules that are in place. And doesn't change, and that's why education is so important. What we were saying earlier about as children driving to Texas, and my father always stopping in Van Horn and then onward. As children, we don't understand and we don't talk to them, so we just think it's a natural thing. And that's why I'm so happy that James did this, because it brings awareness. Then things start clicking. Oh, that's why. That's why. Only when you make those connections can you then start saying, that's why we need to change this, and that's why we need to vote, and that's why we need to be concerned about who we put in the Board of Education, who's on our city council, because you can't go beyond what the law is in the book. So I really thank you.
Thank you. Emil, did you have something for me?
Yeah, thank you, because I always had questions of why things were the way they were. Okay. And now you brought a whole lot of clarity. Good. Of why things were set this, that way. Why were, the east side of LA was always run down more so than the west side of LA, and it was just, it was, I would obviously, you can obviously see, the difference in the mentality as well.
I think that's what Ray was talking about.
And then you don't know why.
Right.
Yeah, when you don't know why, you're just like, and then like this all kind of like puts it all together, puts the puzzle together.
Good. This is my contact information. If you need anything or call me or talk about something, you want me to come out and do a presentation. Two things before you leave. I'll be doing this, if you missed any part of this presentation, you came a little bit late, I'll be doing it again on the mall branch next week from 2 to 4. 2 to 4. This is really good to have your friends and family and kids, have your children come out, have families come out, It's really, it's really, I think it's important. So hopefully I made it so it's not so like, but that, there's some information that we kind of need to know to help themselves. And lastly, before I get to Ray, the Black History Conserve Center Committee put out this great flyer. It talks about all the great events that are going on in the city of Moreno Valley and some of Riverside for Black History Month. This committee did a really good job, and we have some copies here. I have some available to you. So like I said, my name's on here for today, for tomorrow. They have things going on at the mall. Today at 2 to 4, the movie Something the Lord Made. I don't know if you guys heard that. We're going to play that with a discussion about the Blue Baby. It's really good. So anyways, pick up one of these if you want to know, do something in the month of February.
Can you please also talk about what's happening next Saturday here at the branch, or can I do that?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Look at it.
So next.
And this is Ms. Sheree, she's supervisor over adult services here at the library.
So I just wanted, the Dora Nelson Museum will be here next Saturday at 10 o'clock. So she'll be here next Saturday, also commemorating African American History Month, as well as Denise Fleming, she ran for mayor. She will be here doing a presentation on the 16th, which is also a Saturday from 10 to 12. And her presentation is the state of Black America. So you guys are more than welcome to come back. And like James said, we have programs going on all over Moreno Valley. So go ahead and expand your mind.
And it's on It's on the calendar, so if you get one of
Yes,
these,
it's on the
you'll
calendar.
have the information.
Thank
Yeah, Moreno Valley's doing things, Moreno Valley's doing things. Afterwards, come up, I actually, not to pick it up, I'm trying not to keep them dog ears, so we kind of look at the books and not look through them because they're going like that. But you can look at these. These are one. Okay, so if there's not any more questions, thank you for coming out.
I
That's
just
my
want to
time.
make it real quick. I'm glad you did this today because it was so educational. Also, it kind of encouraged me to do more research. I mean, the internet is full of information at the touch of your finger. We all have phones, computers, but again, there's so much information, and for you to bring it together like this, that was a great thing. Thank you.